Hello, AP World History students, and today we are going to China. Just a quick review. Mao defeated Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalists left for Taiwan. The Republic of China was proclaimed by Mao Zedong in 1949. Today I'm giving you a brief introduction of aspects of Mao's time in China, and the next class lesson you will be watching a 43-minute video called Mao Declassified. So China under Mao in the 1950s and 60s. So the goal, of course, was to modernize, and this poster somewhat illustrates the fact of maybe trying to industrialize parts of China. Mao also wanted to eliminate private property. Of course, this was foundational for Mao and his vision of a communist China. He has a 5-year plan, begins in 1955. And like Stalin, he attempts to industrialize very rapidly. Now, the problem with Mao, and I've done a lot of reading on this, is Mao, while he wanted to industrialize, he really didn't want to use a lot of science to do so. And many of his attempts at modernizing, at increasing crop yields, etc., were absolute disasters. Collectivization was an aspect of Mao's rule that called the Great Leap Forward that lasted from 1958 to 1961. So basically, what he did was his policies took all of the private land, farming land, away from the landowners, and then he tells them, you can just increase your harvest by planting your seeds close together. And he gave them so much bad science that they had to follow. And then I read an example of one place where they put together, the people of this one village put together a harvest, or not a harvest, but rather a crop, and had kind of faked putting all of these plants in this crop and had a kid sitting on top of it to show how much their yield had increased. Well, the reality was the peasants couldn't meet the quotas. It was absolutely impossible to meet the quotas because the science was so bad behind the farming techniques that he had proposed were going to give them these great and fantastic yield. 20 million, maybe more than that. Sometimes when we see numbers like this, especially in China, where we don't really have great records, it's just mind-staggering to think of the number of lives that were lost because of the, quote, Great Leap Forward and these huge advances in agriculture that Mao proposed. One of the most notorious periods in Mao's reign was the time period called the Cultural Revolution. And you're going to learn about a lot of this during the video that you're going to watch. The idea behind the Cultural Revolution was not to bring back ancient culture of China, not to elevate in any way all of those wonderful things that Chinese culture had brought us in artwork and poetry, in silk making, in pottery making. No, that wasn't what they wanted. He wanted quite the opposite, actually. So first of all, elevation of the peasants. Now that is something that we see in prior Chinese history, that we do, the Chinese did appreciate the role of the peasants, but Mao in particular wanted to elevate the status of the peasants. He also, in particular, wanted to target the elite and the educated. Now, there's something called the Red Guard that you're going to watch more about in the video that you're going to see, but many of the elite and the educated were actually assassinated for their roles, just outright killed because they were elite or because they were educated, and they were subjugated to these shaming sessions. So, like I said, they were beaten or killed. Some of them went to what was called re-education camps, and in those they would be re-educated in the ideas of Maoism. They were involved in book burning. Now, anytime we see that a culture is burning the books of their own heritage, this is not something that is going to lead to forward advancement. It's just a lesson of history. Burning books is burning your heritage, and that's what they did. Mao went through a party purge, and even Deng Xiaoping, who would actually later on become an important reformer in the Chinese Communist Party, he was brought to a re-education camp. Others were just killed if they did not follow the party lines of Mao. The youth were a tremendously important part of the success of the Cultural Revolution, and I think you're going to see that in the video. The idea was if your teachers are subversive, turn them in. If your parents are subversive and they don't support Mao, turn them in. And in fact, for a while, there wasn't even school. Property was confiscated, of course, in the attempt to collectivize all property, whether it was agricultural, industrial, or personal private property. Um, this period of time, the Cultural Revolution, deprived China of talent and education. You're going to see in the video that for a couple of years, there was no education whatsoever. The universities were closed. In the 1980s, when I was a student in university, all of a sudden, all these students started arriving from China and not knowing Chinese history because we learned nothing about Chinese history when I was growing up. I wonder, why are they coming to the United States? Like, don't they have their own universities? Well, as it turned out, they did it. They do now, and they have done a very good job of reinstituting their universities and their science and their technology. But after the Cultural Revolution, China was really deprived of a lot of talent and education. So let's look at Deng Xiaoping now as Mao's successor. Actually, Mao died of a heart attack. Deng Xiaoping would come into power some years after Mao passed away, actually. And he, like I already mentioned, was a former victim of the Cultural Revolution in that he was forced to go to a re-education camp. What Deng Xiaoping wanted to do was improve East-West relations. My own in-laws, my father-in-law, who is an obstetrician gynecologist, was invited on a medical trip to China in order to develop a relationship with the people of China. When I visited China, there was a road. So we had taken an airplane to this region of southern China, and there was one road in that region, and it just went basically from the airport to a river, which is a beautiful river. It's called the Po River, and the road was called Clinton Road because it was built for President Bill Clinton to visit. So Deng Xiaoping suggested a socialist market economy. In other words, keep the ideas of communism, but allow for some forms of a market economy. Now, this ended up being a really successful strategy for China. And as China opened up to the West, actually many American companies and other Western companies started hiring Chinese companies to do work in, for example, the garment industry. If you look at a garment that you're wearing right now, you might see that it was made in China. In 1989, there were huge demonstrations, pro-democracy demonstrations by students, university students in Beijing at Tiananmen Square, which is a place we've talked about many times, and you're going to see on the video as well. In these pro-democracy demonstrations, the demonstrators were hunted down, some of them were attacked, some of them were killed, but the students were demonstrating for China to become even more open than the socialist market economy that Deng Xiaoping proposed. Because of Deng's violent response to the Tiananmen Square demonstrations, this did cause a blow to East-West relations for the time. However, they were able to increase and return to their East-West relations. This is all I'm really going to talk about with China at the current time. You're only supposed to have a 15-minute lesson for today. You can also read the textbook pages that I note on your Schoology page, and then just really get as much as you can from the movie Mao Declassified that you will watch in your next class period. Thank you and have a great day.